this scientific session, it has something special in it that has truly highlighted the importance of research and evidence-based medicine. Research is to see that everybody else has seen already and to think what nobody else has thought yet. It has the power to create more new knowledge, but creation of this knowledge needs a responsibility of doing it in the correct manner. And this is what our next topic is about, conducting and reporting clinical trials with integrity. Our speaker has traveled down from Spain, Professor Khalid Saeed Khan, Distinguished Investigator for Beatrice Galindo Program at University of Granada, Spain. With an H index of more than 70, he has published over 400 peer-reviewed papers and supervised 25 higher degree theses. He is the lead author of systematic reviews to support evidence-based medicine, which won a BMA Medical Book Award. He is former editor of BJOG, EBM BMG, and BMC Med Education. His core outcomes in women's and newborn health, the Crown Initiative, was awarded a BMA Strutt and Harper grant to help reduce research waste. So please join us here on stage and present your talk. Thank you.
To the minimum. I'd like to talk about trials because when we talk about what you see here, evidence-based medicine, in this endeavor, the most important evidence comes from randomized controlled trial. That is why. Another reason why I want to talk about trials is that I think you may know that after publication, some trials are retracted because some problem occurred. Maybe it was misconduct or maybe it was an honest error, but the findings of those trials are not trustworthy. Therefore, my focus is not just on randomized controlled trial, but also on how such trials should be conducted and reported in a way that the integrity of the trial can be immediately obvious to the readers. And this is particularly important for our society, because our society has a journal, and the journal has a responsibility that the trials it publishes, and the issue you will see in front of you has a randomized trial reported in it, that this type of a trial, when you see it, you can immediately be confident that this trial is trustworthy. I'd like to say a little bit about myself because I spent nearly 25 years out of Pakistan, and during this time I was more or less cut off from my own country. And the opportunity to return and reconnect came when I became member of the coronavirus research task force in Pakistan, where Professor Javed Akram was also a member. And I am grateful to him because he played a role in bringing me back into connection with the colleagues and the profession in Pakistan. Having completed medical school in Pakistan with the previous speaker, Dr. Butt, in the same medical school, I spent some time working in Kenya. And on returning from Kenya to Pakistan in 1990, I had the opportunity to publish my first paper in an international journal. This was more than 30 years ago. I then did some training in research in Canada and published my first meta-analysis in 1995, following which I spent these 25 years in the UK, 15 years of which were as professor at Birmingham and then in London. I was also director of research at 2 big hospitals. And this experience led me to learn not just about doing research, but about doing research with integrity. And I'm grateful to the introduction which presented my editorship role, which I won't cover in detail. I had a chance to talk about research and research integrity in nearly 40 countries in all continents across the world. I have co-authored around 24 randomized controlled trials with 13,000 randomized patients. As a researcher and a clinician, I can say to you that the most important person in research is not the researcher, is not the editor of the journal that publishes the article. It is the patient who consents to take part in the study, because they volunteer their data, and their volunteerism is not associated usually with any medical benefit. It is their donation to you, to us, to researchers, that makes research possible. So please value the contribution they make at the same level as it deserves, which is more than the fame and the thickness of the CV that researchers achieve by adding lines of their publication to their CV. Okay, when we talk about integrity, we often talk about this type of problem, that thalidomide caused some problem because research wasn't adequately conducted, or that the CDC in the United States cheated in consent in syphilis randomized trials, but also talk about COVID. This happened, this started only 3 years ago. We're not talking about the previous century or the previous millennium. Here is an article published from Harvard Medical School in New England Journal of Medicine. Within 1 month of its publication, a concern is issued and then the article is retracted. The problem of integrity is not something historical, it is alive today. Here is a list of a world map of retracted articles with 200 of these papers appearing in the era of COVID concerning COVID. In a developed country like Holland, nearly 12-15% of people admit to having observed or themselves having taken part in some form of questionable research practice. In a meta-analysis, this is confirmed across various studies that have looked at this. And this topic is now also becoming obvious in the mainstream media. And from this very month, the hottest research news comes from the second best university in the world after Harvard Medical School, that is Stanford. And perhaps you don't know this name, but this gentleman is, or was until 1st of September, the rector or president of the Stanford establishment. And one of his papers from 20 years ago had a complaint made about it about 10 years ago, and then that complaint repeated 5 years ago, and then a year ago an investigation started in their own university, which ultimately led to the retraction of this paper. So once again, I emphasize to you, the problem of research integrity is a worldwide problem. The largest number of retracted papers are in the United States of America, followed by Japan, followed by China, followed by Germany. Pakistan is much lower down in the list. This is probably also related to the lower number of publication output that we have from our own country. So now we move on to clinical trial. Well, we have lab research. We talked a lot about genes and genome and immunology in the previous presentations. These things have to be taken forward into research directly into patients to generate evidence from which we can make policy. So this journey is called translation. It goes in the context of drug development through various phases, which we call phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 trials. Randomization is typically only used in phase 3 trial. And this is the type of study that I am focusing on in my presentation. A typical trial takes people and randomizes them into a group, which you may call intervention, and another group which you may call standard care, In the case of vaccine trials, the standard care did not exist. The standard for comparison was placebo. So placebo is frequently used as the control group in randomized control trial. Because I heard about how to advise patients concerning healthy lifestyle, and somebody talked about lambe chalo, do more walking. Think about this. Today, somebody else mentioned an alternative intervention also. That was Aadha Ghanta Nafil Pad lo. Right? I want you to use this as an example of how one can do a simple randomized control trial. It could be done by the society. The trial I'm about to talk about, it does not cost money or need investment by a pharma industry. You can randomize people into telling them the standard advice, which is lambe chalo, or intervention, which is aadha ghanta nafil pad lo, and then you can follow this up to see who complies with the intervention more. Because I can tell you that I've looked at a lot of randomized trials concerning advice on physical activity. And in many of those trials, the control group has more activity than the intervention group. Here, in the Pakistani context, you could potentially do a trial from the society, a low-cost, high-value trial that could help to prevent the diabetes and heart disease that we've been talking about a moment ago. This is the type of trial that I'm talking about in my presentation. Here is another description of the various names. And just a couple of months ago, the journal Nature, which is also a top journal, has in fact asked these questions. How many trials can be trusted? So I would urge, if society undertake this trial, that it does it in a way and reports it in a way that it can be trusted when it is published. For integrity, we often talk about Hong Kong principles. There are many things in integrity, but there are two main things, two groups of things. One is ethics, and the other is responsible research conduct. For example, if there is missing data, well, the responsibility lies to minimize the loss, but also to transparently and honestly report that there was loss of data. So when we talk about integrity, there isn't just one thing that is important. There is everything that we do in research to report it transparently is what is important about research integrity. So when a trial is being conducted, the expectation is that all of these things will take place and oversight will be provided. And for this, there should be steering committees and data monitoring committee, and there should be confidential analyses. During the course of trial, there should be monitoring, audits, and inspections. These reports, in my opinion, should be made publicly available on the trial website so that the public can have confidence that they are taking part in a trial that has oversight and supervision. If problems occur during trial, they should be managed according to existing investigation policies. When a paper is submitted to a journal, it goes through this cycle, which I am sure the majority of you are aware of. Integrity problems are picked up either during peer review or after publication, as in the case of the Stanford president. The journals have a responsibility to make their instructions clear with respect to integrity. So I would hope that with Aziz Saab taking the lead and Rizwan Saab also participating in running the journal, that these instructions will be made clear and obvious to the authors who submit, that we will not tolerate issues with respect to integrity in the manuscript submitted. Statistical advice obviously is important, but remember, statistics only are meaningful if the data collected are trustworthy. that they are not made up, that there isn't cheating in the data collected. When we look at scientific journals, many of them don't have misconduct policies. Where we hope that our journal will not have to investigate any misconduct, but if there is, we should have a policy that we should follow. And look here, when the data are examined, it is possible frequently, even for the blind, to see which data are made up and which are real. So I would urge that data sharing should be the standard for every article that is published in our journal. I now present to you a little project undertaken with the support of ComStack. ComStack is the Science and Technology Organization of the OIC, or Organization of Islamic Countries. It's the lead organization for science and technology for 57 countries. These 57 countries have varying level of investment in research and research activity, but obviously they all need to do the research with integrity. For this reason, ComStack initiated this consultation, which is now published as a statement concerning integrity, and I'm requesting our journal, as well as the Pakistan Journal of Medical Sciences, where Shaukat Saab, the chief editor, has been present in the meeting, that they republish this statement so that the message can be transmitted to our members here in Pakistan. The statement followed the integrity principle in preparing the statement. For example, the statement was pre-registered publicly. Its proposal was available for anybody to comment even before the data were collected. It collected the expert panel covering all the different aspects of a randomized trial, all the way from conception to patient engagement, to publication, to meta-analysis, and to policy making. And the experts came from all over the world, not just from the Muslim countries, from all over the world. These were people who had conducted trials themselves, had published trials, had investigated trials, had analyzed data, had meta-analyzed trials, and had created policies using trial data. And they took part in a consensus survey where they were asked questions like, what is their opinion concerning informed consent? Should patients give input into the development of the informed consent? Other questions, for example, this one, where there was not unanimous agreement, should there be public documentation of the trial as it goes forward? And with these findings, these data were analyzed, publicly shared at the time of publication, at the time of submission to the journal, even before publication, so anybody could reanalyze these data and give us comments. And subsequently, it existed as a preprint for nearly 9 months before its peer review was completed and the article was published. I think the idea of introducing preprints should also be encouraged within Pakistan, because this, I believe, is the future of publication and peer review. Subsequent to its publication, it has been launched through various events, and I think this event can be considered as one of the events where this statement is being disseminated. And obviously, I am hoping that the journal will follow up by republication of this statement, which will then become available to members in printed form. So bringing all of this to conclusion, randomized trials should be prospectively registered. The statistical analysis plan should be prepared before analysis is carried out. Data should be shared. There should be transparency. The reporting should be according to the registration and the protocol. This can be expected not just in trial, but in all studies. Trying to catch those who have made some error is one thing. But really the important thing is to educate the researchers so that they don't end up in problems that eventually will be picked up as errors or potential misconduct. So science is for society. It is not just for the CV of the researcher. I think I can also say that investigation in science has been practiced by the pioneers of healthcare in the Muslim history. And they have all taken investigations seriously as a religious duty. So for us to take part in research is not just an optional extra. In our profession, it is our professional duty. Research should be undertaken with integrity, because anything that has the potential to lead to false or dangerous clinical policies is very dangerous for the patients. And the idea is to nip the evil in the bud, and I think we need to do that through education, and society has a strong role in doing this. And I think society also has a role in seeking its membership to develop the expertise to provide auditing, monitoring, and oversight to clinical trials that take place in Pakistan. Informed consent is a key thing. Patient engagement in development of informed consent is now becoming the standard. I think our society should also create a collaborative group where patients become part of the society and assist us in thinking about what are the priorities for the society and for the research in which the society will take part. And publication should be transparent in the way that I described earlier. And with this, I bring my presentation to close. Thank you very much.
So I just want to emphasize what you said, that there are very real global consequences of doing poor science and misconduct in research, right? So हम लोग ये समझते हैं, some people think that, oh, मैंने एक paper publish कर दिया तो क्या फ़र्क पड़ेगा? It will not make much of a difference. I'll get my CV done, but it won't harm patients. I'll give you two examples which Dr. Saeed would be very familiar with, and most of you would be familiar with. How many of you think that some vaccinations are associated with autism? So there are some people who think that. So this was based on a research misconduct of a person who published one study from the UK about 20-30 years ago. Single study got published in JAMA, one of the top medical journals. और आज तक हम उसका there are millions of people who have children who have died by not getting vaccination because people and even some doctors still perpetuate that. Hundreds of clinical trials after that, properly done clinical trials, have not shown any association between vaccination and autism, but we lost millions of lives.
आदिल भाई वो हमारे पार्टी का था, gastroenterologist था वो.
So that is example of research misconduct, right? The other thing you mentioned is errors or poor research, and we have seen the consequences in COVID. So we talked about azithromycin, hydroxychloroquine. The reason this became in vogue was based on a study on 26 patients by a French group, a very, very respected researcher. 26 patients got published, poor science, and because we had nothing else, it got perpetuated, and the amount of azithromycin, hydroxychloroquine that we've given around the world and the consequences of that are immense. People have lost lives. You may know that azithromycin is actually associated at population level with severe cardiovascular events and many other events, diarrhea and C. difficile infection and so forth. So it's not hypothetical alone. It's actually millions of people dying because of these two things. Thank you.
Saeed bhai, ¿qué pase? ¿Qué pase?
Sorry,
you speak Spanish or Pashto?
Sí, por favor. Si quiere hablamos en español, sin problema.
I have worked in Gibraltar. I have worked in Gibraltar. So
sorry, I wasn't expecting that there will be a Spanish speaker in the audience.
No, because I worked in Gibraltar.
Oh, fantastic.
So, you know, with the NHS, and I speak Pashto, so Pashto and Spanish.
That I don't speak, with apologies. Although my surname is Khan.
What I was going, yes, sir, what I wanted to say was, you see, we don't have a whistleblower concept. देखें अगर मिनिस्टर साहब के बारे में मैं कुछ कह दूँ ना कि इन्होंने कोई गड़बड़ की है, सो माई कैरियर वुड बी ऑनलाइन। नहीं, आपके बारे में तो कह सकता हूँ, अपने पेशावर के मिनिस्टर के बारे में। We don't have this concept of, you know, reporting on a colleague. Like you said, say, you know, I will do 50 patient, you know, I'll say I've done 500. In actual fact, it would be 50 and the rest would be cooked. And we're going to talk about it later on about the training in Pakistan. And that is one of the problems, that you expect the doctors, the budding doctors, to submit theses and submit research. But actual, you know, and this concept of having laymen on editorial board or the regulatory authority is non-existent. So how does that, you know, how do we counteract that?
Well, this I think is not a unique problem to Pakistan. I mean, the participation in research by the medical community in general is low, and it is difficult to enthuse medics to take part in research. But I think there is an opportunity where Pakistan is, what, the 5th or 6th biggest country in the world. It does not have a problem with sample size, achievement of sample size. If people take part, we can do studies more quickly, more rapidly. That's why many vaccine manufacturers came to Pakistan to recruit patients.
Yes.
I think medical curriculum at undergraduate level must start with highlighting that without research, profession cannot develop. Without research, not possible.
Actually, Khalid, you know it as well. We are infants as far as regulations of clinical trials is concerned. We never had any regulations till about few years ago, when Supreme Court had to take a suo motu notice on one of my researches, you know, and finally there was a regulatory mechanism now intact. Our regulation is that we have institutional ethical review boards, and then we have national NBC, National Bioethics Committee. And once you go through that, then you go to the Clinical Trials Committee. And then each site where the trial is to be conducted, that has to be approved for whatever it is, phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trials, phase trials. So that is inspected.
Yes.
And then also the clinical trial itself needs to be registered and approved by DRAP. Okay, they have clinical whole section working for it. And then they are supposed to monitor the trial. Every month we need to, as investigators, we need to send them an update, and the data safety monitoring board can halt the trial whenever they want to. But the issue is that unfortunately, even they are struggling for people who are well trained to conduct research within the board. So that is the problem, because they rely on.
Sure. I believe the society has a strong role in developing the people with expertise and
culture,
uplifting their
the culture,
confidence and competence in providing the oversight that's required. And I hope one day in the near future the society will present the PROTECT trial, which we designed together and which you led. And it's for me, having taken part in more than 24 trials, was an exemplary effort in Pakistan at a time when medics were afraid to get out of home, that a team of people from UHS went round to over a dozen hospitals around the province in order to encourage people to take part in randomized trial, and patients took part in trial without difficulty.
You know our difficulties, like our meta-analysis, which is inshallah hopefully to be published maybe in next few months in Lancet. It took us, what, 2.5 years just to put things together. So in Pakistan it's very difficult to conduct research. That is why, not only to conduct research, but also to convert good research into a good research paper. That's even, so that is why the UHS, when I was there, we started medical journalism department. And alhamdulillah, now it's gone on from degree to diploma, and now it's also issuing certificate for medical editing and things like. So I think we are progressing, but slowly. But you are absolutely right that every trial protocol, in the interest of transparency, should be published and also should be available trials.com. We are developing our own website in Punjab, just where Punjab initiated trials must be registered.
Well, that's a fantastic initiative.
Right. Just a quick question for my understanding, basically. There are some trials which are not possible. And actually what happens is that a device gets approved and then it comes in. So what we call a phase 4 studies coming up. So phase 4 studies are many times retrospective analysis. And then actually what you're doing is that you're looking at some device, or you're looking at some therapy, or looking at something. And someone observes something, and it says, okay, now I can't do an ethical analysis on this, so let's go into a retrospective analysis. So what is your take about retrospective analysis if you have the data? And then of course there will be data missing, that which has to be shared, that this amount of data is missing. But then there is a data which is there, and you can't work on that data because of the disease or the device or the thing that you're talking about is that rare or going on. So what about retrospective analysis?
Well, this will take a whole day to cover this topic. I'll give a very short answer. I work and think in a very simple way. There are two types of research. Ones that observe what happened in the past, and others that tell you what should be done in the future. Usually, simply by observing what happened in the past, you cannot tell what should be done in the future. When COVID came, we knew nothing about what happened in the past. In fact, we had to do randomized trials to know what we should do in the future. So I think if you think of it in a simple way, you will know the answer, where stands the retrospective approach.
Khalid, I think there are two types of researches. One is for impact factor, which normally is done.
Sure.
But the most important research is for impact, not for
Impact.
factor.
I agree with you.
So we do a lot of both types of studies. So one answer to that, in addition to the eloquent answer, I really like your statements, I'll quote you, is that there is a role for both. But you have to differentiate. So यहाँ पे मैंने भी in the last 1.5 day, some people have used the word efficacy and effectiveness interchangeably. They're not the same. So the retrospective trials or real world studies is what we call them, can look into effectiveness, not into efficacy. So efficacy is science, to make it very simple, and effectiveness is what happens in real life. There is a role for those. दूसरी चीज़, the other thing that has happened is a new type of studies have mushroomed now called emulated target trials. You may have read some of those, and we have done some of them as well. So they are done on existing data, but they emulate or very closely resemble a clinical trial, because you put those things without ourselves knowing what happened in the future, what would happen in the future. We design them in a way. They're still not RCTs, but as close as it gets to that.
So thank you very much for your expert comment. I'm going to thank Professor Khalid for his very comprehensive review and the correct